Welcome to Communicate to Lead, the podcast that empowers leaders and aspiring leaders to communicate with clarity and impact. I'm Kelly Belton, CEO and successful entrepreneur, and your host for today. I'm here to equip you with all the essential tools and strategies to master effective communication and lead your team to success. As the founder and CEO of The Tailored Approach, my goal is to empower you to be the best leader you can be. So sit back, relax, and join me in today's episode as we dive into the art of communicating like a true leader. Hey there, it's Kelly Belton, and you're listening to Communicate to Lead. I've been sitting with something lately that I wanted to share with you. As I talk with clients and colleagues, there's this elephant in the room that we're all dancing around. With layoffs happening across industries, diversity initiatives being scaled back or dismantled in many organizations. In a job market that feels like quicksand, it can be tough to know how to lead right now. I want to be completely honest with you. I don't have all the answers. I'm not an economist or a fortune teller. But what I do know is communication and leadership. And I know that pretending these challenges don't exist isn't helping anyone. So today, I wanted to have an honest conversation about leading during uncertain times, not from a place of doom and gloom, but from a place of practical reality. Make no mistake, acknowledging what's happening isn't a weakness. It's what genuine leadership demands. By the end of our time together today, you will have practical communication frameworks to navigate this period of uncertainty, both for yourself and for those who look to you for guidance. So let's dive in. One of the most powerful moments in my career came when a leader I respected looked a room full of nervous employees in the eye and said, "I don't know exactly how this will play out, but here's what I do know, and here's how we'll navigate it together." That honesty cut through the noise and resonated so deeply. Why? Because we are wired to detect insincerity. When leaders pretend everything is fine while the building is metaphorically on fire, they don't inspire confidence. They undermine their credibility and create distance. But here's why many leaders get stuck. They think their options are either toxic positivity, everything is great, just keep smiling, or complete doom. We're all headed for disaster, there's nothing we can do. Both extremes damage your credibility and leave your team feeling unsupported. So what's the alternative? I call it the reality check communication model, and it has 4 simple parts. First, acknowledge what's happening. Stick to the facts. Our industry is experiencing layoffs. Our company is re-evaluating several initiatives. The job market is showing signs of instability. There's no need to catastrophize or minimize. Simply give them the reality. Second, name the emotions, yours as the leader and your team's. I know this creates uncertainty, and uncertainty can feel uncomfortable. Some of you might be worried, and that's completely understandable. This validation is crucial because it creates psychological safety. Third, create space for questions and concerns. What questions are on your mind? What would be most helpful for us to discuss? These types of questions help others to share. And when someone shares, resist the urge to immediately solve or dismiss. Sometimes people need to voice their concerns more than they need solutions. And finally, shift to what remains within your control. Here's what we know for certain. Here's what we're focusing on this week. Here's how we'll keep communication channels open. This redirection is crucial because it moves people from feeling helpless to feeling purposeful. It gives them solid ground to stand on and a clear path forward when everything else seems uncertain. Let me walk you through a quick example from my own experience. A few years ago, I was working with an organization going through a significant restructuring. The leadership team was hesitant to say anything until all details were finalized, which left weeks of silence and growing anxiety. I coached one director to use this framework with her team. She gathered them around and said, "I know there are changes coming to our department structure. I don't have all the details yet, which I find frustrating too. I imagine you're concerned about what this means for your roles. I want to create space for your questions, even if I can't answer them all yet. And here's what I commit to. I'll update you every Friday, even if the update is simply that there's no new information. We will navigate this together. What happened next was that her team reported feeling significantly more secure than others, despite facing the same uncertainty as other teams. The difference wasn't more information, it was honest communication. So, did you know that stress and uncertainty actually changes how our brains process information? It's fascinating. When we feel threatened, even in subtle ways, our cognitive processing shifts. We have trouble retaining details. We misinterpret neutral information as negative, and we struggle to think long term. This means that your usual communication approach might not land the same way during uncertain times. So I've developed what I call the 3R communication framework. The 3Rs stand for regular, relevant, and relatable communication. Let's break these down. Regular means consistent touch points, even when there's no new information to share. Uncertain times create information vacuums, and in those vacuums, rumors and anxiety flourish. A brief check-in that simply says, no major updates today, but I'm here and I'm focused on X, can work wonders for your team. I was coaching a senior leader recently who wondered if these no news updates would just annoy her team. So we tested it. And her team actually said that these consistent check-ins were the most valuable communication they received during their company's reorganization. They didn't need big revelations. They simply wanted and needed consistency. That's the first one, regular. The second R is relevant. Focus on what matters most to your team right now. This might seem obvious, but I often see leaders plowing ahead with long-term vision discussions when their teams are worried about next week's paycheck. Meet people where they are. This doesn't mean you abandon future planning. It means acknowledging immediate concerns first and then creating a bridge to longer-term thinking. Here's some language you could use. I know the upcoming department changes are top of mind. Let's address those questions first, and then we'll shift to our Q3 planning. Both are important and both deserve focused attention. See how easy that is? Then we have the final R, which stands for relatable. This is about showing your humanity without burdening your team with stress. It is a delicate balance, I know. So saying something like, I was disappointed when I heard about the budget cuts too. I've been thinking about how we can adapt our plans while still focusing on what matters most. Shows you're human while still maintaining a leadership presence. What doesn't work is venting your frustrations or sharing your unprocessed emotions. Here's a good rule of thumb. Share feelings you've already worked through, not ones you're still in the middle of processing. And take all the time you need to process with a mentor, your coach, a trusted colleague, someone at home before you share it with your team. Now, you might be wondering, how do you actually implement these 3Rs in real time, especially when you're navigating your own reactions to uncertainty? This is where intentional preparation becomes essential. One technique I teach my clients is the preparation pause. Before any important communication during uncertain times, pause and ask yourself the following 3 questions. 1, how frequent has my communication been? That brings us to the regular. 2, what's most pressing for my audience right now? Relevant. 3, how can I connect authentically without overwhelming my team with my emotions? The relatable part of the framework. This simple check can dramatically improve how your messages land, especially when people are operating with reduced cognitive bandwidth. One of the biggest challenges of leading through uncertainty is navigating what seems like contradictory needs. Your team needs empathy and direction, They need understanding and boundaries. And they also need both flexibility and structure. This apparent paradox trips up many leaders. They swing too far in one direction, becoming so empathetic that they lose sight of necessary boundaries, or they become so focused on structure that they forget the human element. The key is not choosing between these needs, but skillfully integrating them. Let me share a framework I call compassionate clarity. It starts with recognizing that true compassion includes honesty and true clarity includes understanding. Here's how it works in practice. First, create psychological safety through active listening and validation. This might sound something like, I appreciate you sharing that concern. It makes perfect sense why you'd be worried about that. Then establish clear parameters. Here's what we can do. Here's what isn't possible right now. And here's how we will make decisions moving forward. That simple phrasing helps you create clear parameters. Here's what we can do. Here's what's not possible. And here's how we can move forward. And finally, these boundaries should be connected to shared values or purpose. You can do that by saying something like, we're setting these guidelines to ensure we can continue serving our customers while also supporting this team's well-being. You're not choosing customers over your team or vice versa. I saw this in action with a client who was leading a team through significant budget cuts. In their team meeting, several people suggested taking on additional client projects to prove their value, which would have meant unsustainable overtime for everyone. Instead of simply rejecting the idea, the leader said, I hear your dedication to our company's success, and I value that commitment deeply. At the same time, my responsibility includes protecting this team's well-being. So we'll focus on delivering excellence within sustainable hours rather than taking on more than we can reasonably handle. Our best proof of value is sustainable, high-quality work, not more work. This brings me to an essential point. Modeling sustainable practices is non-negotiable during tough times, during uncertain times, during any times when things might be challenging. Your team watches what you do more than they listen to what you say. If you tell them to practice self-care while you're sending emails at midnight, guess which message lands stronger? So this is where boundary setting becomes crucial. And some boundaries you might need to establish or reinforce might be around clear work hours, response time expectations, meeting-free focus blocks, and priorities and non-priorities. I find that many women leaders in particular struggle with setting these boundaries during uncertainty because they feel an increased pressure to be available and supportive. But remember, your sustainable leadership is what your team needs most. So make sure you create those boundaries and you stick to them. Now, let's talk about a simple but powerful exercise called control circles. Take a piece of paper. Yes, do it right now, unless, of course, you're driving. Then feel free to do this exercise a little later. But take a piece of paper and draw 3 concentric circles. That means 3 circles, one inside the other, like a bullseye or a target. Once you have done that, take 5 to 10 minutes to brainstorm and categorize the various aspects of your current situation. In the innermost circle, write what you can control directly. Things like your communication, how you structure your day, which priorities you focus on, and how you respond to others. That's your innermost circle. Now, in the middle circle, list what you can influence but not control. Perhaps how your team interprets information, the timeline of certain projects, or how colleagues respond to your suggestions. That's the middle circle. Let's move on to the outer circle. Here's where you acknowledge what's completely beyond your control, like market conditions, organizational decisions made at higher levels, or broader economic factors. Once you have populated each one of these circles, focus your energy primarily on the inner circle. Strategically engage with items in the middle circle and practice acceptance of the outer circle. Set this visual reminder somewhere visible as you work. Put it up on your wall, add it to your calendar. Make sure that you can see it so you don't obsess about the things you can't control or maybe the things you can influence but not control. You want to spend your energy on that innermost circle, which is the things that you can directly control. So once you are clear on those 3 circles, it becomes so much easier to know how to navigate your day to day. This visual reminder helps refocus energy where it can have impact rather than draining it on factors beyond your reach. I've had clients create these circles with their teams, which leads to remarkably productive conversations about where to focus collective energy. So here's a challenge for you. Once you have done the exercise for yourself as the leader, do this exercise with your team. Maybe you have an upcoming meeting and you can set aside 10 minutes and spend 3 minutes on each one of the circles, and then come to the conversation of, where do we as a team want to spend our energy? Let me know how that plays out. Okay, there's a lot of talk about resilience these days, and it's something that's pretty dear to me. Resilience is one of my values. But when we talk about resilience all the time, it can happen that the word loses its meaning. But resilience isn't merely about bouncing back after difficulties. It's about developing the capacity to navigate challenges while they are happening. And here's an important distinction. Individual resilience is different from team or organizational resilience. And as a leader, you need to cultivate both. Individual resilience comes from self-awareness, boundaries, and support systems, while team resilience requires intentional communication practices and a shared understanding. One technique I have particularly found effective is scenario planning, which focuses on capability rather than prediction. So instead of trying to predict exactly what will happen, which is impossible in truly uncertain times, focus on building adaptable capabilities. The communication around this is really important. Instead of saying we need to prepare for worst case scenarios, which can often trigger fear, rather try, let's build our adaptability muscle so we can respond effectively to whatever comes our way. This slight reframing maintains honesty about challenges while focusing on capability rather than catastrophe. Another powerful practice is celebrating small wins consistently. I know I talk about this all the time on the podcast, and it's important here too, because during uncertainty, our brains become hypervigilant to threats and often miss positive developments. As a leader, you can counter this by intentionally highlighting progress, no matter how incremental. This isn't about manufactured positivity. It's about balanced attention. So this is how you can phrase it. We're still navigating budget constraints, and we successfully launched a new client project last week. Both realities exist and both deserve our attention. So I recommend implementing a weekly resilience check-in, both for yourself and your team. For yourself, it might look like, what challenges me this week? What resources did I draw on? What did I learn that might help future situations? And what small wins occurred that might have been overlooked? For your team, consider incorporating a brief resilience moment in regular meetings, and perhaps focus on the following: one challenge we navigated, one resource that helped us as a team, one learning that we can carry forward, one win, no matter how small. And that is for your team. A client of mine implemented this practice during her company's merger, and she told me it fundamentally changed team morale. They weren't ignoring difficulties, but they were building a more complete narrative about their experiences and capabilities. They didn't simply feel like victims as if something was happening to them, but they realized what they could take charge of, what they could control, and what they could focus their energy and time on. As we wrap up today, I want to acknowledge something important. Leading during uncertain times is genuinely difficult. It requires holding space for complex emotions, your own and your team's. It demands clear communication when the situation isn't clear, and it asks you to provide stability when you might not feel stable yourself. But I'm convinced of this. Acknowledging uncertainty shows strength, not weakness. It demonstrates the courage to face reality head on. And people don't expect you to have the perfect answers or have all the answers. They do expect honesty, presence, and a willingness to navigate challenges together. The communication frameworks we discussed today, the reality check model, the 3R, regular, relevant, relatable, the compassionate clarity, and strategic resilience practices aren't simply nice theories. They are practical approaches that have helped real leaders guide their teams through difficult times. I'd love to hear how you're navigating these challenges in your own leadership. Send me a DM on LinkedIn or Instagram. You can find the links in the show notes. Your experiences will help all of us learn and grow together. Next week, we'll be exploring how you can advocate for yourself and your ideas when organizational priorities are shifting. Because, my friend, that is happening. Until then, remember, authentic communication isn't merely how we connect during uncertainty. It's how we find our way through it together. And there's so much power in doing it together. If you found this episode helpful, would you take a moment to share with another woman leader who might benefit? When we navigate these challenges together, it becomes so much easier to do. And finally, if you're looking for more personalized communication strategies for your specific situation, I do have limited spots available for one-on-one leadership, coaching, and consulting. Click the link at the top of the show notes to schedule your free leadership clarity call. Let's see how we can support your leadership during this uncertain time. Until next week, my friend, I am Keely, reminding you that great communication is the foundation of inspiring leadership. Keep learning, keep growing, and remember to communicate to lead.